How do you decide who to sue? Do you go after individual terrorists? Do you go after terrorist organizations, states that support terrorism? How do you decide who to target?
We go after everything that smells like terrorism. We go after terrorists, we go after organizations, states that support terrorism, financial institutes that funding terrorism or providing financial services to terrorism. I can give you examples. We have lawsuits against terror organizations like Hamas, like the Islamic Jihad, like Fatah. We have lawsuits against the Palestinian Authority, against countries like Iran, Syria, organizations like the European Union. We have recently cases against the Arab League, against the Arab Bank, against other European banks. Everybody that supports terrorism, involved with funding terrorism, funds the organizations is under our lawsuits.
Now, are you saying that they're violating some laws? What laws do you say that they're violating in order to bring them into court?
When someone comes and murders terror victims, the family of the terror victims has a right to sue the one who's in charge for the murder. If they can sue the individual, the murderer itself, and they can sue the terror organization which the suicide bomber or the terrorist came from. Sometimes the family can even sue the state that supported these organizations.
So you're representing the families who have been damaged or their loved ones have been harmed or killed?
Absolutely. And in addition, sometimes we represent people who got injured, still alive, but injured from the terror attacks.
Now, how do you decide where to sue them? How do you pick your venue?
Most of the terror attacks, unfortunately, occurred in Israel, so obviously the Israeli court has jurisdiction. We have plenty of lawsuits in the Israeli courts. But if the terror victims are American citizens, or if their relatives are American citizens, they have a right to sue in the American courts. This is done according to a special law in the United States that allows terror victims to sue terror organizations or states that support terrorism in the United States, even though the terror attack happened outside of the United States, and even though the terror organizations themselves do not present in the United States. This is a very special law that was enacted after the Aquila Lauro. That
the ship that somebody was pushed overboard.
Right, Leon Klinghoffer, an elderly Jew from New York, was shot to death, and his body was pushed to the water on its wheelchair. The family of Klinghoffer filed a lawsuit in the United States against the PLO, but the court had to dismiss the case because the PLO wasn't present in the United States at the time. The Congress was very angry that American citizens got killed and there is no one to sue, and they passed a law that allows American citizens to sue terror organizations even though the terror attack didn't happen in the United States. Then, after a couple of years, they enlarged the jurisdiction and they allowed terror victims to sue states that support terrorism in one condition, that these states are listed in the watch list of the State Department.
So that would not include the Palestinian Authority, for example, since they are not a state.
Not under this law, exactly. You can sue Iran, you can sue you can sue Syria, you can also sue Saudi Arabia. They have too much oil to be on the list. But you can sue the Palestinian Authority under a different act.
Do the people you're suing contest the lawsuit? Do they send lawyers to fight against you, or do they just ignore it altogether?
It depends. The Palestinian Authority hires a lawyer. They hire an ex-Attorney General of the United States named Ramsey Clark.
We've all heard of him.
Yes.
Former Attorney General of the United States.
He comes to court and he fights the cases till a point. Most of his argument is that the United States has no jurisdiction upon the Palestinian Authority, that the Palestinian Authority is a state and they have sovereign immunity. Fortunately, the court in the United States rejects all these type of arguments, and in this point, Ramsey Clark do not participate anymore. They don't file a clear defense, and we get judgment against them. Iran, for instance, doesn't send any representative. They don't send lawyers to court. We get judgment against Iran. Syria also hired Ramsey Clark to represent them in court. So it very depends on who the defendants are.
Have you won substantial monetary judgments?
Yes. First of all, we won many judgments against Iran, against the Palestinian Authority. We were able to collect a small portion of these judgments, but we are in litigation because we froze some of the Iranian assets and some of the Palestinian Authority's assets in the United States and also in Israel and other countries. I think it will take some time that these cases will conclude, but I very much believe that we'll be able to collect a majority of these cases.
Now, let's say you win a judgment and you win monetary damages, but you're unable to collect. Is there still value in winning the case?
Absolutely. The whole case drives from the idea of terror victims fight back. The terror victims, more than anything else in the world, don't want to be victims anymore. And suing the terror organizations, suing the one who devastated the life of the terror victims forever, is the process the terror victims want to go for. And getting a judgment, getting a victory in court, even though you cannot collect it, is absolutely the struggle that the terror victims want, and obviously want to win it in the end. Money cannot satisfy any horror, any pain, any suffering that these terror victims went through all these years. Money cannot bring back to life the one who died, the one who got killed in the terror attacks. Money cannot bring back the legs of the children that their legs were cut off. So the moral judgment itself is the beginning of the victory.
Now, is there any evidence that your lawsuits are in fact putting a crimp in terrorist activity, causing them to hold back, or maybe causing some of their financial backers to hold back on funding them?
I can give you a very nice example. The Arab Bank is the biggest bank in the Arab world. He ran a reward program for the suicide bombers. If you were a father or a mother of a suicide bomber, or if you were the wife of a suicide bomber or any close relative of him, you could have gone to the Hamas headquarters in Gaza, get a letter that you are a relative of the suicide bomber, bring the letter to the bank managers in Gaza, and the bank manager of the Arab Bank will give you a reward of $25,000. And it was all over the world. I mean, ads were published in countries like Iran, like Saudi Arabia, encouraging people to donate money to the specific bank account. People knew that if they give money to the specific bank account, they can later on see the ambulances taking away the bodies of the dead and the injured in Jerusalem. And the Arab Bank ran this reward program, made a little mistake, because he ran this program while having a branch in Manhattan. We gained American jurisdiction upon the bank, and we filed a lawsuit against him for $5 billion compensations. We filed on behalf of 50 families of terror victims. Now, the case is not to be over yet. The Arab Bank litigates the case. They hired several law firms to represent them in court. But right now, immediately after we filed the lawsuit against the Arab Bank, they changed the way they're doing businesses. From now on, they don't dare to send any money to the Hamas organization. They don't transfer any money to any terror organization in the Palestinian Authority. They don't even agree to send money to the Palestinian Authority's government because it's headed by Hamas. So you see that the terror organizations in the Palestinian Authority, because of the result of this lawsuit, cannot get money from the Arab Bank anymore. And it's not only the Arab Bank, we filed other lawsuits against European banks, against the National Westminster in London, and against Credit Lyonnais in France. Both were in charge with providing financial services to the organizations. And these banks, right after we filed the lawsuit against them, no longer open bank accounts to Islamic charities without checking very carefully with the intelligence agencies in Israel if these charities are kosher or not.
Do they have some underground way of getting around this limitation? Do they have some secret way of funneling money that won't be caught?
They can smuggle the money in
Cash?
suitcases. But how much money you can smuggle in suitcases? $1 million, $10 million, $40 million. We all know about Ismail Hania, who tried to smuggle $40 million in suitcases into Israel, but he was caught. So there is no formal way to transfer money through the banking systems into the banks of the Palestinian Authority. And when you try to smuggle large amounts of cash, you get caught.
Now, you've been pretty busy at trying to track down where this money is coming from. What have you found out about who's really supporting all the suicide terrorists? Is there some small clique somewhere in Saudi Arabia or some other country that is really the driving economic force behind this?
Most of the terror organizations are funded by the states. They are funded by states like Iran, like Syria, like Saudi Arabia. It's not really by individuals. Therefore, if you want to stop the funding, you really have to go against those countries. And we do. We have cases against Iran. We blocked Iran from trading in dollars because they are afraid to keep their money in American banks as a result of such lawsuits. And recently they stopped keeping their money in European banks because we went after the Iranians also in the European banks. I can tell you that last year we received information that the National Oil Company of Iran has a bank account in Rome which has between $500 to $600 million. We immediately took our American judgment against Iran for this amount and domesticated them in the Italian court. And together with the motion of domestication, we filed a motion to restrain the banks from moving the money. The court granted us the lien. He temporarily restrained the bank from transferring the money and called the parties to a hearing in front of him in 10 days. This time, Iran, who doesn't defend themselves in the American court, sent many lawyers to go to court. They sent a representative of the Vatican to come to court. They sent a representative of the Iranian embassy in Italy. They got even the foreign ministry of the Italian government involved. All the banks sent lawyers to the court. They were standing there, 30 lawyers, and screaming at the judge. They had two arguments, but the first one was about collecting judgment against Iran, against the assets of the national company, which are not the same entities. We could have dealt with this argument. We hired experts in international law that proved that in countries like Iran, there is no problem to collect the judgment against the national company's assets. But the second argument was very creative. They claimed that they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. 30 lawyers were standing there in the court, and yet they claimed that they didn't get an adequate notice about the lawsuit. We claimed that we served them properly, but the court, the Italian court, who didn't want to fight Iran over Jewish terror victims, decided to go on the safe side and ordered us to reserve Iran. In the meantime, we took off the lien. So 1 hour, we were told, after we took off the lien, Iran shifted the money from Rome to Thailand. Although we didn't win this battle, we are winning the overall war because as a result of this lawsuit, Iran cannot keep their money in Europe anymore. They cannot trade in Europe. They don't keep their money in European banks because they're afraid of civil lawsuits running after them in the European courts.
So it sounds like this is having a significant effect on them. Now, have you ever been threatened by the terrorists or their supporters? I would imagine they consider you kind of a thorn in their side.
No. No.
Really, so they don't consider you someone they might want to...
No, there are many people above me that if it's a organization wants to get...
Now, having all these lawsuits going, it must take a lot of lawyers. How many people do you have working in your organization?
We have 5 lawyers working full-time in Israel in the organization. And we have law firms which are our co-counsels in the United States and in any country that we have litigation. We have law offices in Canada, in Europe, in states in the United States like New York, Rhode Island,
So you work with lawyers in other countries when you need to. You have people...
Yeah, we need local attorneys.
Is this pro bono work? What happens to the money? Like if you succeed in collecting something, where does that go? Does that go to pay the expenses of the lawsuit, or does it go to the victims, or some division of both?
It's a division of both. Obviously, the TOR victims get the majority of the judgment, of the money that is rewarded. The attorneys in the United States get their part. I mean, they're all working without being paid in advance, but they're working on contingency, and they get their part. And the organization gets its part as well.
Do you need any help or support or assistance at all from the Israeli government, or is this strictly a private effort?
This is a private effort, but the Israeli government tries to help in different venues. There are some branches of the Israeli government who assist us with providing documents and information about the terrorists, about the evidence which are needed to prove their liability in court, about some assets that are needed to collect a judgment against them. We have an access to the military courts to go and find out about the terrorists, about the indictments against the terrorists, the confessions that they gave in court in order to prove our cases. In addition, the Israeli government allows us to run a very high-level mission to Israel, which in the course of this mission we meet the mission participants with Mossad agents and Shin Bet officials.
These are tours you're talking about?
These are the tours that we are taking professionals to Israel to teach them about the security situation in Israel and its struggle against terrorism. And in the course of the mission, the people meet Mossad agents and Shin Bet officials. They go to a frontline position in the Lebanese border. They go to the military court to watch a trial of terrorists from the Hamas. They visit the Supreme Court, meet with the president of the Supreme Court. All this high-tech and high level of meetings and programs are being made as a result of our good relationship and the help that we are receiving from the Israeli government.
And the purpose of these tours is what? To familiarize people in the West with the actual situation in Israel?
Yes, and in addition to make them familiar with the work of our organization, to get their support, to get their involvement with the organization. We need lawyers all over the world to come and to assist with the legal work. We need doctors and other professionals to come and to help with expert opinions. We need medical experts to come and testify in court. We need CPAs about to testify about the loss of income that happened to the terrorists. So, and we need psychologists to come and testify in court about damages that happened to the terror victims. The goal of the mission is to get people involved, to spread the word, and to let the world know that there is a fight against terrorism that can be done, that private citizens and private organizations can take a role in the war against terrorism, and anybody can do it.
Now, what motivated you to get into this work? It sounds like pretty much of a full-time job.
It is. before the Intifada, before 2000, we were involved with terror victims, represented them in different high court proceedings in Israel. And when the Intifada broke out in 2000, we felt a very big need to help the terror victims and to stop, or some way to fight the terrorism. We followed the model of the Sovereign Poverty Law Center in Alabama, headed by Morris Dees, who fought the neo-Nazi groups in his neighborhood.
I think they largely bankrupted the Ku Klux Klan.
Right, right. But he bankrupted them. He caused them a great deal of damage. He stopped them from functioning. He took over their assets. He took over. They couldn't rent anything. They couldn't buy anything. They couldn't own anything. And in this way, he really stopped them from functioning. And we thought that the same way Morris did to his local organizations, we can do to the local organizations in our neighborhood, which means in the Middle East. And we filed cases, simple cases, against the terror organizations. In the beginning, it was one case against Hamas, one case against the Islamic Jihad, against the Palestinian Authority, one case against Syria, Iran, etc. And slowly, when we started winning decisions on our favor and even judgments in our favor, we got flooded from phone calls of terror victims who wanted us to represent them in court. We couldn't continue to do it as a private lawyers. We established Shurat HaDin, Israel Law Center, to take these hundreds of cases and file them and manage them in orderly manner in the courts around the world.
Is there any way that the terrorists or their supporters can apply a similar weapon by suing Israel in foreign courts? I've heard of some cases, for example, in Britain, I believe, where people sued to have certain Israeli military leaders declared as war criminals so that they would be subject to arrest if they ever set foot on British soil. And some people canceled trips to Britain because they were afraid they might be arrested.
These are two different legal actions. The one that we are dealing with are civil lawsuits against the Palestinian organizations. And indeed, Palestinians are suing the state of Israel, but they cannot sue it in foreign states. They can sue her only in Israel. In other countries, Israel is a sovereign state, and she's got sovereign immunity. She cannot be sued in any court. By the way, the way you can sue Iran and Syria is an exceptional law. As I said before, it's an exception to the Sovereign Immunity Act in the United States that allows you to sue countries that support terrorism, because the Congress decided that countries like that do not behave as sovereign countries anymore, and they should not enjoy sovereign immunity. Therefore, you can sue them. But Israel is not a state that supports terrorism. It's not on the watch list of the State Department. You cannot sue Israel in the United States, neither in the rest of the world. The cases that are filed against individuals, IDF officers that come and visit Europe, like London, we know about Sergeant Ronald Mogg that tried to visit England and ran in the last minute because of a criminal indictment that was filed against them, are criminal cases. There are criminal cases that were filed against these IDF officers, which have nothing to do with civil lawsuits, which means private citizens cannot indict the IDF officers, only the governments of these countries. And it's not a counter to a civil lawsuit that was brought against the Palestinian organizations or against states that support terrorism. There are legal actions that are taken based on specific law that's enacted in England or in Belgium, in the case of Prime Minister Sharon, that also was indicted, if you remember, it was indicted in Belgium, and after a tremendous political effort, the indictment was cancelled. But these are laws that European countries make themselves in charge of the rest of the world and decide that they have the jurisdiction to indict and to convict and to try officers and people around the world. I believe that these laws are
That can rebound on you because other countries could pass laws that declare that you're subject to their laws too. That's a
Absolutely.
precedent which is...
Absolutely. Israel can announce that she has the jurisdiction to indict any person that walk in her territory. Then what?
I think you sued the European Union some years ago for funding terrorism. How did that turn out?
This was a very unprecedented case that was filed against the European Union on behalf of a British citizen. His wife got killed in a terror attack, and his daughter and he himself got severely injured. They are both sitting in wheelchairs until this day. And we sued the European Union because the European Union gave $10 million to the Palestinian Authority every month since the Oslo Accords were signed, since 1994. And Yasser Arafat diverted this money to terrorism. The Israeli security services and Israel's government warned Yasser Arafat and warned the Palestinian Authority that the money is going to terrorism. I'm sorry, they warned the European Union that Arafat is using the money for terrorism. The European Union claimed that they don't have the evidence, they don't believe that Yasser Arafat is taking the money for terrorism. They ignored Israel warnings. And when we saw that, we decided to take the EU to court. We filed a lawsuit against them. They didn't come to court. They claimed that they have a diplomatic immunity. And we had to litigate the case in court whether they have diplomatic immunity or not. Unfortunately, the court decided they do have diplomatic immunity in Israel, and the case was withdrawn. Shortly after the decision was made, the European Union had its own investigation where exactly the money that they gave Yasser Arafat was going, and they found out suddenly that we were right, that indeed the money was either stolen or given to the organizations.
So you might raise consciousness about an issue. Even if you don't actually win a case, you'll get people thinking, and maybe there will be some change.
Right. Everybody believed at the time that the European Union funds the Palestinian Authority, which funded terrorism.
Now, I understand that you also have a lawsuit against the Israeli government itself right now. What's that lawsuit about?
That's a lawsuit that was brought on behalf of the Sderot residents.
That's the town just outside the Gaza Strip that receives rocket and missile attacks almost every day.
Right. The life in Sderot are unbearable. The kids cannot sleep at night. Parents don't sleep at night because they want to watch the kids. People are going to sleep with their clothes on just to be prepared if the alarm will go off. Everyone suffers from psychological tensions, and the life became a real nightmare in Sderot. And on the other hand, the Israeli government decided that they don't fight the Qassam rockets anymore. They decided on a ceasefire. It doesn't matter that the Palestinians are shooting Qassam rockets over and over again.
So Israel, they have a unilateral ceasefire even though the other side is still shooting at them?
Exactly. We filed a lawsuit against the Israeli government asking the court to declare that since Israel breached its obligation to safeguard the life of the residents in Sderot, the residents in Sderot do not have to pay taxes to the Israeli government anymore. It's based on a very simple idea that there is a contract between a state to the residents of the state, that in return for paying taxes, in return of taking money from your pocket and giving it to the government has an obligation towards the citizens, and the main and first obligation is to safeguard their life. If Israel do not, from its own reasons, whatever reasons they want to, do not fulfill its obligation, do not provide the security that these residents are entitled to, like the rest of the country, Sderot residents should not pay taxes.
How is that lawsuit going?
The state asked for extension to file a defense. The court granted us the extension. We are waiting for a defense to be filed in the case.
Now, it seems a little unlikely that they would allow people not to pay taxes because other people could raise cases why they shouldn't have to pay taxes for other causes. It might be easier just to defend the people. I don't understand why they're not defending the people. Do you have any explanation for why Israel allows people to shoot at its citizens without shooting back?
I can't give you a rational explanation why Israel is doing it, because unfortunately there are a lot of irrational steps that Israel is taking recently. But obviously it will be much easier to defend the residents in Sderot. Israel has political considerations why they don't want to make the effort to safeguard the life of the residents of Sderot. Probably one of them is if you want to stop the Qassam rockets, you really have to enter Gaza. You can't shoot them from the air. It's exactly what happened in Lebanon. In Lebanon, the Hezbollah shot missiles towards Haifa, towards the northern settlements, and the only way Israel could have stopped these rockets from falling were to invade Lebanon, to go by foot, not from the air. They tried for 30 days to bomb them from the air. It didn't work. Only after Israel got into the land of Lebanon, foot by foot, house by house, village by village, they went into agreement and they stopped the shooting. Israel, if they want to stop the Qassam rockets in the Negev, have to do the same thing. They have to go to war against Hamas. And right now, probably, it's not the best interest of Israel to do so. They don't want to enter into a war against the Hamas in Gaza.
If someone is
And
shooting
they
at
agreed
you,
to sacrifice the life of the residents in the Negev.
if somebody is shooting at you, doesn't that by definition mean you're already in a war?
Not according to the Israeli government. No.
Do you ever come under any political pressure from the Israeli government or any other government to lay off certain people for political reasons, even though you would be justified in suing them?
Not directly, but the State of Foreign Affairs in the Israeli government get involved in our cases. Sometimes they file statements and papers urging us to block these lawsuits. Sometimes when we get in very, very close to assets that we believe we are entitled to, and the foreign ministry believes that they should keep the assets to themselves, or they shouldn't give the assets to us because they want to keep it for better days, they certainly get involved, file papers in the court. The Attorney General files a position paper and says what he thinks about the case. So far, the involvement of the Israeli government didn't hurt our cases. Each time the government got involved, we were able to defeat their position, and because luckily the Israeli courts went and gave the ruling according to the law, according to the evidence that they saw, without really paying very much attention to the political reasons behind the Attorney General's position.
I think now there's a petition before the Israeli court. Someone filed a petition demanding that Israel stop targeted assassination of terrorists, and you're involved in the case kind of as a friend of the court. You're filing a brief saying that it would be a bad idea to stop targeting terrorists. What is the rationale for not targeting terrorists, and what argument are you presenting?
You know, every time the IDF finally do something to protect the life of the Israeli citizens, there is always a human rights organization, or there is always somebody that will stand and say, no, 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 no. The IDF should not fulfill its duty and let just Israeli citizens to get killed on the streets. One of them was the recent petition that was filed against the IDF, saying that the policy of targeted killing that the IDF is taking in the past years is against international law. They said that you come and kill individual without a trial is you violate his human rights. Especially when you kill the individuals and other innocent people get killed together with him, you violate the rights of the innocent people. We joined the government and filed an amicus brief which states that you have to take into consideration the rights of the Israeli citizens and afterwards to take into consideration the rights of the Palestinians. Because it's true that sometimes if you kill a murderer or you kill a terrorist from the air, you kill whoever is with him in the car. But if you don't do that, if you don't kill him and the rest of his fellows in the car, you might cause a death of hundreds of other Jews in the future.
Well, your reference to international law raises an interesting question, namely, what is considered to be the supreme law in Israel? Is it international law? Is it laws passed by the Israeli government? Is it traditional Jewish law? I mean, what system of law is recognized as the supreme system?
Right. The petitioners, the human rights organizations claim that the law that governs is the international law because there is no Israeli specific law that deals with such type of situations. We came and claimed that indeed there is a lack of law and cases in these issues because whoever thought about terrorists coming to your house and killing you day after day, and the only way to stop this terrorism is by targeted killing. It's a very, very new and pioneering issue. Therefore, it was never dealt before. There is no Israeli law that deals with such situations. And we say that there is a lacuna of this law, but we have to go by the Jewish law. Because there is a basic law in Israel that tells you that each time there is a lacuna in the law, each time there is a lack of information in the law, you have to go to the tradition of the Jewish people, which is the Jewish law. And according to the Jewish law, you are not even allowed to go after these terrorists and to kill them, but it's a mitzvah, it's an obligation to go and to kill them first. Because if you don't kill them first, they will come and kill you.